When my daughter, Lila, threw me a surprise 75th birthday party filled with gag gifts and insincere well wishes, I felt a deep sense of betrayal and hurt. After years of putting my family first and providing for their every need, this is how they chose to honor me. With cheap laughs and a complete disregard for my feelings. That's when I realized that I had been living a lie, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM and a source of endless favors. But I wasn't about to let them have the last laugh. Oh no. I had a surprise of my own in store, one that would teach them a lesson they would never forget. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The sun was just starting to peek through the curtains of my bedroom when I heard a gentle KKK at the door. Groaning, I rolled over and checked the clock on my nightstand. 7:30 a.m. Who could be bothering me at this hour on a Saturday? Come in, I called out, my voice still rough with sleep. The door creaked open, and there stood Lila, a huge grin plastered across her face. She was holding a tray loaded with breakfast foods, pancakes, bacon, eggs, and a steaming mug of coffee. It was a sight that would have warmed my heart if it hadn't been for the mischievous glint in her eye. "Happy birthday, Dad," she practically sang, setting the tray down on my lap. "I can't believe you're 75 years old today. How does it feel to be officially ancient?" I winced at her choice of words, but forced a smile onto my face. "It feels just like any other day, sweetheart. But thank you for the breakfast. This is a lovely surprise." Lila perched on the edge of my bed, watching me expectantly as I took a sip of the coffee. It was lukewarm and bitter, nothing like the rich, smooth blend I usually enjoyed. But I swallowed it down anyway, not wanting to seem ungraceful. "So, Dad," Lila began, her tone overly casual, "I was thinking, since it's such a big milestone birthday, we should do something special to celebrate. Maybe a party with all your friends and family?" I nearly choked on my bacon. A party? With all my friends and family? The idea filled me with a sense of dread. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy social gatherings, far from it. But the thought of being the center of attention, of having to endure hours of forced conversations and insincere compliments, made my skin crawl. "Oh, I don't know, Lila," I said carefully, setting down my fork. "I'm not really one for big celebrations. I'd be just as happy with a quiet dinner at home with you and your brother." But Lila wasn't having it. She leaned forward, her eyes wide and pleading. "Come on, Dad. You only turned 75 once. Don't you want to mark the occasion with something memorable? Something that shows everyone how much you mean to us?" I hesitated, torn between my desire to make my daughter happy and my own aversion to being in the spotlight. Lila had always been the more outgoing of my two children, the one who thrived on social interaction and loved nothing more than planning elaborate events. Her brother Marcus was more like me, quiet, introspective, and perfectly content with a good book and a cup of tea. But as I looked into Lila's hopeful face, I felt my resolve crumbling. She had been through so much in the past few years: a messy divorce, a string of dead-end jobs, and a never-ending cycle of financial troubles. If throwing me a birthday party would bring her some measure of joy and fulfillment, who was I to deny her that? "All right, sweetheart," I said at last, reaching out to pat her hand. "If it means that much to you, then let's do it. A party it is." Lila let out a squeal of delight, bouncing up and down on the bed like a child on Christmas morning. "Oh, thank you, Dad. You won't regret this, I promise. It's going to be the best birthday celebration ever." With that, she leaped up and dashed out of the room, calling over her shoulder that she had a million things to do and that I should just relax and let her handle everything. I leaned back against my pillows, suddenly feeling very old and very tired. I had a sinking feeling that I had just agreed to something I would come to regret, but it was too late to back out now. As I picked at my now cold breakfast, my mind drifted back to happier times. Times when my wife, Marjorie, was still alive, and our family was whole and happy. She had always been the one to plan our birthday celebrations, pouring her heart and soul into every little detail to make sure that each of us felt loved and appreciated. But Marjorie had been gone for 5 years now, taken from us far too soon by a stroke that had left me reeling and lost. And in the void she had left behind, my relationship with my children had grown strained and distant, marked by misunderstandings and unspoken resentments. I knew that Lila meant well, that she was trying in her own way to fill the role that Marjorie had once played in our family. But as I stared down at the congealing eggs on my plate, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, that the party she was planning would be more about her own needs and desires than about truly celebrating my life and my achievements. With a heavy sigh, I pushed the tray aside and heaved myself out of bed. There was no point in dwelling on my misgivings now. The die had been cast, and all I could do was hope for the best and brace myself for whatever lay ahead. But as I shuffled into the bathroom to begin my morning routine, I couldn't shake the nagging sense that this birthday would be one I would never forget, for all the wrong reasons. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and anticipation. Lila was true to her word, throwing herself into the party planning with a fervor that bordered on obsession. Every day brought a new flurry of phone calls, deliveries, and whispered conversations that stopped abruptly whenever I entered the room. At first, I tried to take an interest in the preparations, offering my opinions on everything from the guest list to the menu. But it quickly became clear that Lila had her own vision for the event, and that my input was neither wanted nor appreciated. "Don't worry about a thing, Dad," she would say with a dismissive wave of her hand. "I've got everything under control. You just focus on being the guest of honor and leave the details to me." So I retreated to my study, burying myself in my books and my memories while the sounds of Lila's frantic planning echoed through the house. Marcus, who had flown in from Seattle for the occasion, seemed content to let his sister take the lead, only emerging from his room for meals and the occasional game of chess with me. As the day of the party drew near, I found myself growing increasingly anxious. I had never been comfortable being the center of attention, and the thought of facing a room full of people all focused on me made my palms sweat and my heart race. But I told myself that it was just a few hours, that I could endure a little discomfort for the sake of my daughter's happiness. After all, hadn't I spent my entire life putting my family's needs before my own? The morning of my 75th birthday dawned bright and clear with a hint of autumn crispness in the air. I woke early, as was my habit, and made my way downstairs to the kitchen, hoping to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee before the chaos of the day began. But when I entered the room, I was greeted by a scene of utter pandemonium. Every surface was covered with platters of food, stacks of plates and glasses, and piles of garish decorations in shades of black and silver. In the center of it all stood Lila, barking orders into her phone while simultaneously arranging a bouquet of helium balloons shaped like tombstones. "No, no, no," she snapped, her face flushed with irritation. "I specifically told you I wanted the over-the-hill banner, not the happy 75th one. This is supposed to be a joke, not a sentimental tribute." I felt a sudden tightness in my chest, a sinking feeling of dread and disappointment. A joke? Is that what this party was to her? A chance to mock my age and make light of my life's accomplishments? Lila must have sensed my presence because she whirled around, the phone still pressed to her ear. "Dad!" she exclaimed, her voice overly bright. "You're up early. I thought you'd be sleeping in on your big day." I forced a smile onto my face, trying to ignore the way my stomach churned at the sight of the morbid decorations. "You know me, sweetheart. I've never been one for lying around in bed. Is there anything I can do to help?" Lila waved me off, already turning back to her phone. No, everything's under control. Why don't you go relax in the living room? I'll let you know when it's time to get ready for the party." I hesitated, feeling a sudden urge to confront her, to demand an explanation for the insensitive theme and the lack of consideration for my feelings. But something held me back. A lifetime of habit, perhaps, or a fear of causing a scene on what was supposed to be a happy occasion. So I simply nodded and retreated to the living room, sinking down into my favorite armchair with a heavy sigh. As I sat there, staring at the framed photos on the mantelpiece, Marjorie and I on our wedding day, a young Lila and Marcus grinning gap-toothed at the camera, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. How had it come to this? How had the love and respect that had once been the cornerstone of our family eroded so completely? I knew that I wasn't blameless, that in my grief over Marjorie's death, I had withdrawn from my children, leaving them to navigate the world without my guidance or support. But I had never expected Lila to repay my neglect with such callousness, such disregard for my feelings and my dignity. As I listened to the sounds of her laughter and chatter filtering in from the kitchen, I felt a deep sense of betrayal and hurt. Was this really how she saw me? As a doddering old fool to be ridiculed and humiliated for her own amusement? Had I really failed so completely as a father that my own daughter would think nothing of treating me with such disrespect? The thought made my eyes sting with unshed tears, but I blinked them back furiously. I would not give Lila the satisfaction of seeing me crumble, of knowing how deeply her actions had cut me. Instead, I took a deep breath and straightened my spine, summoning every ounce of my old air traffic controller's calm and composure. If Lila wanted to turn my birthday into a farce, then so be it. But I would not let her see how much it hurt, how much it made me question everything I had ever believed about my family and my place in the world. I would play my part, smiling and nodding and pretending to be amused by the gag gifts and the black humor. But inside I would be seething with a quiet, cold fury, a fury that would fuel my next move, my ultimate revenge against the ungraceful children who had taken my love and my generosity for granted for far too long. With a grim smile, I pushed myself out of my chair and made my way upstairs to get dressed for the party. Lila wanted a guest of honor? Well, she was about to get one who would teach her a lesson she would never forget. The party was in full swing by the time I made my way downstairs, the living room and backyard filled with a sea of unfamiliar faces. Lila had invited what seemed like half the town, distant relatives, old work colleagues, and a smattering of her own friends, who looked far too young and trendy to be celebrating a 75th birthday. As I walked into the room, a hush fell over the crowd, followed by a smattering of applause and a few half-hearted cheers. I plastered a smile onto my face and waved awkwardly, trying to ignore the way my skin crawled under the weight of so many stares. Lila materialized at my side, a microphone in her hand, and a manic grin on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice booming through the speakers, "let's give a big round of applause for the man of the hour, my dear old dad, Wayne Talbot." The crowd dutifully clapped and whooped, but I could see the confusion and discomfort on many of their faces. They didn't know me, had no real connection to my life or my achievements. They were just there for the free food and the chance to gawk at an old man in a party hat. Lila, oblivious to the mood of the room, launched into a long, rambling speech about my life and career. But instead of focusing on my accomplishments or my values, she seemed to delight in poking fun at my age and my supposed infirmities. "Dad's always been a bit of a technophobe," she giggled, eliciting a few chuckles from the crowd. "I remember when we got him his first cell phone, he couldn't figure out how to turn it on for a week." I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger, but I kept my smile firmly in place. This was supposed to be a celebration of my life, not a roast at my expense. But Lila was just getting started. She regaled the crowd with stories of my forgetfulness, my clumsiness, and my supposed inability to keep up with the times. Each anecdote was met with laughter and knowing looks, as if my age and my struggles were something to be mocked and derided. By the time she finished her speech and called for the gifts to be brought out, I was seething with barely contained rage. But nothing could have prepared me for the humiliation that followed. One by one, Lila and her friends presented me with a series of gag gifts, each one more insulting than the last. There was a large print book of crossword puzzles, a jar of prune juice, and a T-shirt with the words, "I'm not old, I'm vintage," emblazoned across the front. But the worst was yet to come. With a flourish, Lila unveiled a custom-made tombstone, complete with my name and a blank space for the date of my death. "For when the time comes," she laughed, holding it up for all to see. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, the air rushing out of my lungs in a harsh exhale. How could she be so cruel, so insensitive? Did she really think that my death was something to be joked about? To be reduced to a cheap party prop? I looked around the room, searching for a friendly face, for someone who might understand my pain and my humiliation. But all I saw were blank stares and awkward smiles, as if no one quite knew how to react to such a blatant display of disrespect. Even Marcus, who had always been the more sensitive of my two children, seemed to be fighting back laughter, his eyes bright with amusement at his sister's antics. I felt something inside me snap, a lifetime of hurt and resentment boiling over into a cold, hard fury. I had spent my entire life putting my family first, sacrificing my own needs and desires for their happiness and well-being. And this was how they repaid me? With mockery and disrespect, with a party that was more about humiliating me than celebrating my life. No more. I would not stand for this. would not let them treat me like a doddering old fool to be trotted out and ridiculed for their own amusement. I drew myself up to my full height, my eyes blazing with anger and determination. "That's enough," I said, my voice cutting through the laughter and chatter like a knife. Lila faltered, her smile slipping a notch. "Dad, what's wrong? We were just having a little fun." "Fun?" I spat, my voice dripping with contempt. "You call this fun? Humiliating me in front of a room full of strangers? Treating me like a punchline instead of a person?" I turned to face the crowd, my gaze sweeping over the sea of startled faces. "I'm sorry, folks, but I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This isn't a celebration of my life. It's a mockery of everything I stand for, and I won't be a part of it for one moment longer." With that, I turned on my heel and strode out of the room, ignoring Lila's shocked gasp and the murmurs of confusion from the guests. I marched upstairs to my bedroom, my heart pounding with adrenaline and righteous anger. I would not let this stand, would not let my own children treat me with such callous disregard. If they thought they could manipulate and control me, to use me for their own selfish ends, then they had another thing coming. I had spent a lifetime being a devoted father, a generous provider, and a pillar of strength for my family. And now it was time to show them just how strong I really was. With a grim smile, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had memorized long ago, the number of my old friend and attorney, Jack Reynolds. It was time to set my plan into motion, to take back control of my life and my legacy. Lila and Marcus wanted to treat me like a joke? Well, the joke was about to be on them. And by the time I was finished, they would learn the true meaning of respect the hard way. The next few weeks passed in a blur of secret phone calls, hushed meetings, and careful planning. With Jack's help, I began to put my affairs in order, updating my will and setting up a series of trusts and investments that would ensure my money went exactly where I wanted it to go. I knew that Lila and Marcus would be expecting me to leave them everything, to continue funding their lavish lifestyles and endless demands even from beyond the grave. But they were in for a rude awakening. Instead, I made arrangements for the bulk of my estate to be donated to a variety of charities and nonprofit organizations, groups that focused on helping the elderly, the vulnerable, and the forgotten members of society. I wanted my legacy to be one of compassion and generosity, not entitlement and greed. Of course, I couldn't completely cut my children out of the will. I wasn't that heartless. But I made sure that their inheritances were modest, just enough to cover their basic needs and nothing more. If they wanted to live the high life, they would have to earn it themselves, just like I had. As I worked to set my plan in motion, I also began to distance myself from Lila and Marcus, pulling away from their constant demands and manipulations. I stopped answering their calls, stopped agreeing to their endless requests for money and favors. At first, they seemed confused, then angry. They would show up at my house unannounced, pounding on the door and demanding to know what was going on. But I held firm, refusing to engage with their tantrums and guilt trips. Instead, I focused on reconnecting with the people who had always been there for me, the true friends and loved ones who had stood by my side through thick and thin. I reached out to old buddies from my air traffic controller days, men who had been like brothers to me during those long, stressful shifts in the tower. I also started attending events at the local senior center, joining book clubs and exercise classes and finding a sense of community and purpose that had been missing from my life for far too long. And as I began to build a new network of support and friendship, I found myself growing stronger and more confident with each passing day. I no longer felt like a helpless old man, dependent on the whims and caprices of his ungraceful children. I was Wayne Talbot, a man of integrity and strength, a force to be reckoned with. But I knew that the true test of my resolve was yet to come. I had one final surprise in store for Lila and Marcus, one last lesson to teach them about the consequences of their actions. And so, on a warm summer evening, I invited them over to the house for dinner, just like old times. They arrived with wary expressions and guarded body language, clearly expecting another confrontation or demands for money. But instead, I greeted them with a smile and a hug, ushering them into the dining room, where a lavish feast was laid out on the table. There were all of their favorite dishes: roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans almondine, along with a bottle of expensive wine and a decadent chocolate cake for dessert. Lila and Marcus exchanged confused glances as they took their seats, clearly thrown off balance by my sudden show of generosity. But as the meal progressed and the conversation flowed, they began to relax, laughing and joking like we were one big happy family again. It was only when the plates were cleared and the coffee was served that I finally dropped the bombshell. "I have an announcement to make," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I've decided to sell the house and move into a retirement community." Lila's fork clattered to her plate, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" "Dad, you can't be serious. This is your home, our family home. You can't just leave." I smiled sadly, shaking my head. "I'm afraid I can, sweetheart. And I am. This house is too big for just me, and frankly, I'm tired of rattling around in it all alone. It's time for me to start a new chapter, to find a place where I can be surrounded by people my own age, people who understand what I'm going through." Marcus leaned forward, his brow furrowed with concern. "But Dad, what about us? What about our inheritance? You always said that this house would be ours one day." I felt a flicker of anger at his words, at the presumption and entitlement that had driven me to this point. But I pushed it down, keeping my voice level and calm. "I'm sorry, son, but I'm afraid that was never a promise, only an assumption. The truth is, I've worked hard all my life to provide for this family, to give you every opportunity and advantage. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to take care of myself, to plan for my own future and happiness." I looked at them both, my gaze steady and unwavering. "I love you both, more than you could ever know. But I won't spend my golden years being treated like a burden, like a walking ATM machine for your every whim and desire. I deserve better than that. I deserve respect and dignity and the chance to live my life on my own terms." Lila's face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. "Daddy, please don't do this. We need you. We love you." But I just shook my head, a sad smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "I know you do, sweetheart, and I love you too. But sometimes, love means doing what's best for everyone, even if it's hard, even if it hurts." I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes, sliding them across the table to my stunned children. "These are for you. A little something to help you get started on your own paths, to build your own lives and futures." With trembling hands, they opened the envelopes, their eyes widening at the sight of the modest checks inside. It was enough to cover a few months' expenses, to give them a cushion as they figured out their next steps. But it was a far cry from the lavish inheritance they had been counting on, the endless flow of money and support they had taken for granted for so long. I stood up from the table, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. I hope that one day you'll understand why I had to do this, why I had to put myself first, after a lifetime of putting everyone else's needs above my own. And I hope that you'll find your own way in the world, just like I did, just like I know you can. With that, I walked out of the dining room and up the stairs to my bedroom, leaving my stunned and tearful children behind. As I began to pack my bags, a sense of peace and liberation washed over me, a feeling of lightness and freedom that I hadn't experienced in years. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, but I also knew that I was ready for whatever lay ahead, that I had the strength and the courage to face it head on, because I was Wayne Talbot, and I was finally free. The sun was just starting to peek through the curtains of my new apartment when I heard a gentle KKK at the door. For a moment I felt a flicker of apprehension, a fear that Lila or Marcus had somehow tracked me down, that they were here to plead or manipulate or guilt me into changing my mind. But as I padded across the plush carpet and peered through the peephole, I felt a rush of relief and joy. Standing outside, a hesitant smile on his weathered face, was my old friend and former colleague, Mike Donnelly. I flung open the door, my face splitting into a grin. "Mike, what a surprise! Come on in, come on in." He stepped inside, his eyes twinkling with warmth and amusement. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything, Wayne. I just wanted to stop by and see how you were settling into your new digs." I waved off his concern, ushering him into the small but cozy living room. "Not at all, not at all. I was just about to make some coffee. Care to join me?" Mike nodded, sinking down onto the plush sofa with a contented sigh. "I'd love to. It's been too long since we've had a chance to catch up." As I busied myself in the kitchenette, measuring out scoops of rich, fragrant coffee beans, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. This was what I had been missing for so long. The simple pleasure of good company, of shared memories and easy conversation. Mike and I had worked side by side in the air traffic control tower for over 30 years, guiding planes through the bustling skies and keeping the traveling public safe. We had seen each other through marriages and divorces, births and deaths, trio and humps, and moments of pure adrenaline-fueled exhilaration. And now, as we sat sipping our coffee and reminiscing about the old days, I felt a sense of coming full circle, of returning to the things that truly mattered in life. "I heard about what happened with Lila and Marcus," Mike said gently, his eyes soft with understanding. "I'm so sorry, Wayne. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been." I shrugged, feeling a twinge of sadness, but no regret. "It was hard, I won't lie, but it was also necessary. I had to put myself first, Mike. I had to start living for me, not just for them." He nodded, his gaze distant and thoughtful. "I get that. It's easy to lose yourself in the role of being a parent, a provider. But at some point, you have to remember who you are, what you want out of life." I smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude for his friendship, his wisdom. Exactly. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm rediscovering myself, figuring out what makes me happy and fulfilled. We talked for hours, swapping stories and laughing until our sides ached. And as the morning slipped into afternoon, I realized that I hadn't felt this light, this unburdened in years. It was a feeling that only grew stronger in the weeks and months that followed, as I threw myself into my new life with a sense of purpose and enthusiasm. I joined a book club at the local library, discovering a love of mystery novels and lively discussions over coffee and pastries. I started taking long walks in the park, relishing the fresh air and the chance to chat with the other retirees who had become my new circle of friends. We would swap recipes and gardening tips, commisers over aches and pains and the challenges of aging gracefully. And every Sunday, I would host a small gathering in my apartment, inviting my closest companions over for dinner and conversation. We would linger over plates of homemade lasagna and glasses of rich red wine, talking and laughing late into the night. It was a simple life, but a deeply satisfying one. And as the months turned into years, I found myself growing more content, more at peace with myself and my choices than I had ever been before. Of course, there were still moments of sadness, of longing for the family I had lost. I would see a young father playing catch with his son in the park, or a grandmother pushing a giggling toddler on the swings, and feel a pang of grief for the relationships that had been severed, the love that had been squandered. But I never regretted my decision, never doubted that I had done what was best for myself and my own happiness. And as I looked around at the new life I had built, the friendships, the hobbies, the sense of purpose and belonging, I knew that I had made the right choice. Because in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the money or the status or the trappings of success, but the simple, profound joy of living a life that was truly my own. And as I sat on my balcony one evening, watching the sun sink low over the horizon and paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a deep and abiding gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. I was Wayne Talbot, a father, a friend, a man who had lived and loved and lost and found himself again. And I knew that, no matter what the future held, I would face it with my head held high and my heart full of hope. Because in the end, that was all any of us could ask for. A life well lived, a story worth telling, and the courage to keep moving forward, one day at a time. It's been 5 years since I moved into Sunnyvale Retirement Community. 5 years since I left behind the trappings of my old life and started anew. And in that time, I've learned more about myself, about life and love and the things that truly matter, than I ever thought possible. Oh, don't get me wrong. It hasn't always been easy. There have been moments of loneliness, of doubt and fear, and the aching sense of loss that comes with growing older, with saying goodbye to the people and places that once defined us. But there have also been moments of pure, unadulterated joy, the laughter of good friends gathered around a table, the warmth of the sun on my face as I stroll through the gardens, the quiet satisfaction of a book well read and a day well spent. And through it all, I've held fast to the lessons I learned in those dark days after Lila's party, the truths that I fought so hard to claim as my own. That life is too short to be lived for anyone else's happiness but our own. That we all deserve respect and dignity and the chance to chart our own course, no matter our age or circumstances. And that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go, to set ourselves and others free to find our own way in the world. I won't lie. There are still times when I think of my children, when I wonder what became of them after I left. I hear snippets of news from time to time, whispers of Lila's latest business venture, or Marcus's struggles to find his place in the world. And a part of me aches to reach out, to offer the guidance and support that I once gave so freely. But I know that they have their own journeys to take, their own lessons to learn. And I know that the best thing I can do is to lead by example, to show them that it's never too late to start over, to build a life that is rich and full and entirely our own. And so I go on, one day at a time, surrounded by the love and laughter of my chosen family. I volunteer at the local animal shelter, finding solace in the unconditional love of furry companions. I take painting classes at the community center, discovering a hidden talent for watercolors and a newfound appreciation for the beauty of the world around me. And every night, as I drift off to sleep in my cozy little apartment, I feel a sense of peace wash over me, a deep and abiding gratitude for the life I've lived and the person I've become. Because in the end, that's what it's all about. Not the money or the status or the trappings of success, but the simple, profound joy of living a life that is authentic, that is true to who we are and what we believe. And as I close my eyes and let the sweet oblivion of sleep claim me, I know that I have found that joy, that I have earned it through every trial and triumph, every loss and every love. I am Wayne Talbot, a father, a friend, a man who dared to dream of a different life and who had the courage to make it a reality. And I am happy, truly, deeply happy. What more could anyone ask for in the end? If you found Wayne's story of self-discovery and second chances inspiring, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales of everyday courage and transformation. And don't forget to share your own experiences and reflections in the comments below. We all have a story to tell, a lesson to learn, and to teach. By sharing our journeys, we remind each other that it's never too late to start over, to build a life that is truly our own. Thank you for being here, for being a part of this community of seekers and dreamers. And remember, no matter where you are in your own journey, you have the power to create a life that is rich and full and entirely yours. So keep dreaming, keep reaching, keep becoming the person you were always meant to be. The world is waiting for your unique brand of magic. And as Wayne's story reminds us, it's never too late to find it. Until next time, my friends, be well, be brave, and never stop believing in the power of your own potential. The best is yet to come.